Welcome to the Mortgage Broker Podcast, tailor-made for Canadian mortgage industry professionals. Proudly presented by A Better Way Mortgage Group, this podcast is your trusted source for insider insights, market updates, and strategies to elevate your career in the ever-evolving world of mortgage brokering. Whether you're a seasoned broker with A Better Way Mortgage Group or an industry enthusiast looking to stay ahead, our episodes are designed to empower you with the knowledge and tools you need to excel in the Canadian mortgage space. All right, we're back for another episode of the Mortgage Broker Podcast. Today we're in episode 18 and another continuation of the perfect loan process. We are now into the sixth iteration of the perfect loan process. And today we are going to be diving into the live deal and to approve stage. So essentially everything that happens from the minute we know we have a live deal, so an accepted offer in a purchase or a refinance or a renewal that's ready to move forward, right until the approve stage. This should be a fairly quick session. There is certainly a lot of critical things that are happening at this point of the process, but it moves quickly in real life and of course for today's episode. In the sixth step of the perfect loan process, this is again the perfect loan process that we Derek and I developed with Thrive Mortgage many years ago, and we've been chatting about these steps of the process. So if you haven't followed along or you're just tuning in now, make sure to go back to episode 9 where we do an overview of the entire PLP. And then in recent episodes 13, 14, and 16, we explored the lead consultation process, the document and collection and pre-review, and which led into our review summary process. And then we wrapped up in episode 17, the most recent episode, focused on the planning and strategy session, which was a pivotal opportunity for the mortgage advisor to sell the strategy and how to move forward in the transaction. So that leads us to where we are today. Deal's gone live. We've done and accomplished all of what I just rambled on there. And now it's time to move forward with a submission to the lender. I'll just touch on how we get notified and to know that we have a live transaction and where to go from there. And then I'll pass it to Derek to just kind of touch on what happens next and the key steps in regards to the automation and what's happening from a team member perspective, because it is definitely a pivotal point in the journey, because pretty much all hands are on deck here when it comes to the loan specialist, the associate mortgage advisor, and the mortgage advisor in the perfect loan process. And again, I always want to preface that you don't have to have a 3-person team. You don't have to have a 2-person team. This can be a one-man show. We just want to really emphasize the compartmentalization of each of these roles and being able to carve those out so you can scale and look at hiring in the future if you choose to. How do we get notified and what happens next? So I'll start. Typically, when it comes to a purchase transaction, I'll start there. We would be notified by the realtor. Typically, our purchases we're working with a realtor that we know, and most of our realtors, I would say, are trained quite well to ensure that they notify our team in a specific way. And how we would ask them to do that is to send our general email, so our info at company email. They would send us an email with the accepted offer, the MLS feature sheet, property disclosure statement. Here in BC, we would have a property disclosure statement, and then any strata documents or any important documents that would be needed for the lender's approval. We would train them to send that to us up front as soon as they have the accepted offer, and send us that email to our general email. Now, we may be working with a realtor that we don't work with regularly. So we would have been in touch with them well ahead of this at time of issuing the pre-approval and at time of when the shopping was getting serious with the client. We would have been reaching out to them to ensure that they follow this process. Again, back to not everyone will follow this. Realtors aren't always the sharpest tool in the shed. They may need us to kind of remind them and push them along. So typically we would be notified by, let's say, a text message or an email in some form, and we would now know that the deal's live. And what that would entail is the team member that receives that notification would then go to the CRM, and we would put the deal into live deal stage. That would then notify everyone on the file that the deal's live, and let's get to work, essentially, because this is critical timing. Typically, we're seeing about 5. I would say we usually see about 5 days for subject removal period. And during this subject removal period, we want to ensure that the deal is broker complete or as close to broker complete as possible. So with that, That's what's occurring on a purchase. Now with a refinance, it's a less of a rush to get the file moving forward because we don't have that timeline of a subject period. But very similar, like after finishing the planning session, we would immediately be moving the deal into live deal stage, assuming that the client's agreed to move forward. And so with that, that's where I'll kind of pass it to Derek, maybe to touch on what are kind of the key components from the team perspective and the automation that's happening after that.
Like Dean mentioned, it doesn't matter. The entire team is trained. So whether a realtor sends it to, the documents email or info, or sends it directly to someone working on the file, the first action is to move the stage in the CRM to live dash deal to be submitted. So that triggers automated tasks for the underwriter or loan specialist, if you want to call them that, the associate mortgage advisor, and the mortgage advisor on the file. So the associate mortgage advisor at that point has a task to essentially make sure that we have all the documentation that we need from the real estate agent. A lot of times you just get a contract. We need the MLS listing. We need the property disclosure statement, developer's disclosure statement, you name it. So their first action is to follow up with that real estate agent, get the information that we need so that the underwriter has a full package to underwrite. At the same time, there's a task that's triggered for the underwriter or loan specialist, and it's to prepare an accepted offer email template, which I'll kind of talk through the minutia on that. But just focusing on the CRM here for a second, a couple of things that we always want to verify and we add to the CRM at the same time as we're kind of updating the file. Subject removal date gets entered, completion date gets entered. There's a note started that says live deal and what documents have been received. And all of these are automated tasks that are triggered. So the associate mortgage advisor is trained. They're tasked to go in, look at the purchase contract. They want to make sure that the buyer's agent is still who we thought that they were. We want their name, phone number, and email address in there as the buyer's realtor, because they will get automated updates throughout the process going forward if it's changed. At the same time, we're also putting in the listing agent's information. And this is something more from a marketing perspective. Throughout the deal, it's always a good idea to touch base with that listing agent, let them know you're working on the file, maybe call them once subjects are removed and say congratulations. It's a great marketing piece. It's a warm call instead of a cold call to a realtor that you probably don't know. So that's kind of the bulk of the automation. We add the property address into the deal title. We want to make sure that the deal is clean, and it's basically not a whole lot of updates have to happen to that file once subjects are removed. So the loan specialist at this point is preparing an accepted offer email, which is really clean, easy to read, and it's essentially a summary of the purchase and their next steps and everything that they need to know. So just kind of touch on the buckets that are in that email. It's a congratulations email. This is an exciting time for you. This is a very focused time, and we need you to be, attentive to anything that we ask you, anything that we're looking for from you for the next 3, 4, 5 days to make sure that subjects can be removed. So the email has a congratulations note. It's got a breakdown of their purchase price, suggested down payment, mortgage amount, property taxes, strata fees, rental income, if that's the case. Important dates. This is really key. So your subject removal date is X with an X amount of $20,000 deposit required. So this is something that's talked about at this point to make sure, as we all know, some clients aren't prepared for this. Their money's in an RSP. They haven't withdrawn it. So you're putting that in front of them, letting them know that that money is required on that date. Completion date, possession date. Going down a little bit further, at this point, keep in mind, if we've done a proper pre-approval for this client, we probably have a gauge on the interest rate and product that they want to go with. Now, if this has changed, we might reference a couple different options. But if we're fairly confident that the market hasn't changed, it hasn't been too long since the original pre-approval, they want a 3-year fix, we're going to reference what we're looking at, which lender we're suggesting. Moving down a little bit further in the email template, estimated closing costs. So depending on the province that you're in, there could be property transfer or land transfer tax, estimated legal fees, estimated cost for inspection if they choose to do one, estimated cost for appraisal if necessary. There's a reference that these are all estimates and they need to be confirmed as they work through the details. Now, the next piece is a big one, documentation required. As we all know, we might have outdated job letters. We might have outdated pay stubs. Maybe this is at a point where they probably should have filed taxes for the last tax year. So anything that's updated that's needed is going to be referenced there. And this is a big piece for the associate mortgage advisor to make that phone call, go through this email with them, catch them up to speed, make sure the down payment hasn't changed, make sure that everything that we're submitting is correct so that we can be efficient for our lenders and for ourselves. So we're not changing the deal 2-3 times. So make sure that everything's clean. and really put emphasis on the fact that like, hey, we need your updated pay stub, right? Like the lender's going to need that upon submission. They want to look at that before they're going to issue an approval. Maybe there's some down payment documents and whatnot. We try to get the client to send all of those documents in same day. And if they can't, we at least highlight which ones are key and really important for them to get to us right away. And then there's just a blurb about next steps. So once you've confirmed the details above, we're going to be submitting for review and approval. The lender will typically take 1 to 3 business days. You can gauge that depending on what type of financing you're working with or what type of turnarounds the lenders have at that time. And then once the approval comes in, you'll be notified through our system. There's an automated email letting you know that we have a conditional approval. And then we're going to be sending an approval email that, again, has some specifics, which we'll go through later in this episode. But those are kind of the key steps when a live deal comes in. Number one, make sure the team, everyone on the file is aware. Update the CRM with all the information that we need. Back to automation. When you put in the subject removal date, it automatically populates subject removal reminders, one for the day before subject removal, one for the day of subject removal. And both the associate mortgage advisor, loan specialist, and mortgage advisor have these tasks as reminders for subject removal, because that's something, as we all know, when you're busy, maybe you miss it, you forget, and then subject removal is tomorrow and you don't have your appraisal done. I guess just the last piece on the automation that comes when that live deal stage is triggered. There's a task right away to have a discussion about the appraisal. And this task goes to the associate mortgage advisor and the loan specialist, and they'll gauge, maybe we're going to a lender and it's a deal that looks pretty clean and it's probably going to get an auto approved appraisal, meaning we don't need one. So in that situation, we'll typically pause if we know there's going to be an appraisal. Maybe it's a private deal. Oftentimes B lending or alternative lending, they need an appraisal. We'll typically order it right away before we get an approval, as long as we know what lender we're going to, just so that we can get ahead of it. As we all know, if we have 5 days for subjects and it takes 2-3 days to get an approval, now we only have 2 days to do the appraisal. So we get ahead of it. We let the client know we're ordering it, let them know to make payment. And if for some reason it ends up being auto approved and the appraisal hasn't happened, you can always cancel the appraisal at typically no cost. So I'll kind of pause there and let Dean or Jason chime in, but those are kind of the initial and important tasks when the live deal comes in.
A couple just key tips that I found very helpful. Going back to when I mentioned when the deal goes live and the realtor is trained, or we've reached out to the realtor if we don't have a connection to get that MLS feature sheet. That data is so important for the file to have that property info submitted with the deal, like talk about all the property tax, all the details on the property. Those are the types of data that helps actually get you an automated appraisal approved. When you submit a deal, like as an example in Velocity, there's actually a feature where you can bring that data in, so that the MLS feature sheet's not so crucial. But being able to utilize tech to ensure that you can get that automated appraisal approved is key. And then having that data is what actually allows that to occur. A couple of pieces that you pointed out that I find really important in that email. So this is the accepted offer email template that we're going to share as a takeaway resource here. That is so important to just keep the framework, everything in writing. So back to our whole theme from the planning session review summary to now, where we're issuing everything in writing. Nothing here should be a surprise, from, again, back to Derek's point, the pre-approval, to then now framing this to the client and then getting the approval. Nothing should be a surprise. Everything has been very, very much presented to the client and laid out. So those are just kind of the reasons and the themes to consistency. So everything is always following a very consistent, transparent process with the client, which I find is very appreciative. And then right before I pass it to Jason to comment, we don't actually CC realtors on this accepted offer email, because there could be some information that maybe we want to keep private with the client, such as the details of the mortgage qualification, what we're actually securing for the client, documents required, so on and so forth. But when the deal goes live, there is some other automation that's going out to the client and the realtor as a text message and an email. And so when the deal is submitted, they're being notified that the deal has been submitted. And that's a big weight off of like realtors' shoulders, especially to know that the deal has been submitted. And again, it's happening very timely. So we're moving very quick. So typically we want to make sure that if we've been notified today, let's say 9 a.m. in the morning, that the deal's live, we're going to make sure that deal is submitted within an hour to definitely by the end of the day, depending on what we need to get that submission out the door. And so when those automated triggers go out, it's very much a relief to the realtor involved. So maybe I'll just pass it to Jason there to comment.
Took the words out of my mouth as to what I was going to talk about is with having such a detailed, consistent process, I have to imagine that some brokers, when they really have this dialed in, they could actually use this as a tool to go out and solicit new realtor partners and relationships just to say, hey, listen, like this is how I operate my business. This is how your clients are going to be treated. So when a broker goes out to market to solicit a realtor based on this process and the consistency of what you do, what would they tell the realtor just in terms of, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Realtor, you guys submit us a live offer. How are you communicating back to the realtor that the offer has been received and that you're working on it? And do you have certain SLAs that you want to meet? Like if the realtor sends you a deal, to your point, at 9 a.m. this morning, when are you contacting them to say, hey guys, hey, Mr. Realtor, I've received this deal and things are in process? Like what's kind of that expected turnaround time, especially when we get into a busier market and we have those subject removal dates that are fast approaching? I have to imagine we want to limit the amount of interactions between that realtor just to say, hey, I've got it, I'm working on it, and it's now in process. So what's that kind of expected time frame for you guys?
Like the initial response is probably the most key. Like if you get an email, or it's typically an email with a purchase contract, like you're trained to respond within minutes if you can, right? Because you look at a list of priority within our business, and that's top priority. Like that's the most urgent situation you're typically going to run into. So a quick response saying, hey, received, we're working on it, we'll update you shortly. Typically, as long as nothing massive has changed, that application should be submitted to the lender within a couple hours at most. So at that point, they're getting a notification that the application's been submitted. Now, the team's trained that once the deal's been submitted, just to touch base with the agent, say, hey, everything looks good. And you know what? Honestly, maybe their credit tanked and now we're dealing with a B lender. These are conversations that you generally want to have with the realtor to say, hey, you know what? A lot's changed here. Their down payment's cut in half, some stuff. So we're working through it, but it all looks good. So give them some context on what's going on. If the deal looks clean, say, hey, everything looks great. We've submitted. We're expecting approval within the next couple of days. We will be sure to update you throughout the process. Like we'll make sure that you have clear communication from us when it comes to subject removal, and especially the day prior. And most real estate agents that, you know, we've worked with consistently over the years understand that. And we don't usually get a lot of follow-ups because they know that if something comes up, we're going to let them know. Like we're never going to be calling someone on subject removal on a Friday at 5 p.m., letting them know the deal's going to shit. Right? Like we're going to be giving them that context up front, letting them know we might need more time. If we need an extension, we're getting way ahead of it for whatever reason that might be. But yeah, like I said, I mean, you got to look at a list of priority within our industry and our business, and that's it. And, you know, that's everything to that real estate agent. Like they're counting their bucks at that point too, right? So to make sure that it's clean, easy, and it's a calm process for them, they're going to want to come back the next time.
Yeah, you did make a good point, though. It certainly is a feature that we can sell to the realtor to work with us, because the number one complaint we get from every realtor would be from like their previous broker relationship would be communication. Like they just don't know what's going on. They're always wondering or having to follow up. We found, which I'll dive into next, is like the milestone updates that we utilize in it's a combination of manual and automated efforts, keeps them informed all along the way. Not just the client, but the realtor is always getting that communication too. And we found that like them peppering us for updates is almost non-existent, which was, you know, a real issue with us, with our business before we implemented the PLP, was constantly having realtors following up with us, looking for updates and trying to figure out what's going on.
I have to imagine there's no better way to kill a realtor relationship than to have them submit a purchase application to you guys. 5 days later, they haven't heard a word, but you're saying in 5 days, I need an extension. And they have no context as to why or where things happen or what's going on in the process. So, yeah, I mean, keeping that streamlined and keeping everyone apprised of things going on, I think, is key to maintaining existing and establishing new long-term relationships.
Back to those automated emails, the milestones is what we call them. There's 13 throughout the process. So there's a milestone that goes out when the deal is submitted. So they're getting that email. There's a video, an explainer. It lets them know that it's been submitted to the lender. We're expecting a conditional approval within a day or two. Once the approval comes in, they're getting an update. Let's say the approval takes 3 days. There's an automated milestone that goes out every single day until the approval comes in that says your file is still under review with the lender. So it's just a general update, but typically that's all a client and a realtor need. The file's under review with the lender, right? And then the approval comes in, they're getting an automated email. And typically when you get the approval, that's another good phone call to the real estate agent just to let them know, hey, you know what, the appraisal's been waived, or we do need an appraisal. It's already ordered. It's scheduled for tomorrow. You know, the conditions look pretty minimal, or you know what, there is actually a pretty hefty condition here that we have to work through, just giving you some context. So I think a formal update once you actually get the conditional approval so that the real estate agent has some context. And keep in mind, like, the client side of things, you know, at that point, you're having a very detailed discussion about the approval and all the conditions that are pending. And again, back to the importance of the conditions, you might have 6 conditions, but only 4 of them are really important so they can remove subjects 2 days later, right? Like, you could probably get your lawyer information next week. You can probably get your void check next week, but the down payment, you know, the strata documents, the appraisal, and, you know, maybe your updated T4, like, those are the 3 things that can kill a deal: down payment, income, and property. So you want to make sure that those are 100% clear before you're ever giving advice to remove subjects.
An update with no progress is better than no update at all.
Totally. Yeah. So just to kind of summarize, like, before getting an approval, and we'll touch on the approval email template, where we'll wrap this up. But before that happens, like, milestones that are going to happen every single time without question would be the first one, which is the submitted to lender. Second one, which is mortgage under review with lender, which is what Derek was just talking about, that's coming daily. And then conditional approval, which is a quick milestone update to let everyone know the deal is approved. There's no details on the approval in that email. It just basically says your deal's approved. There's a video on what's going to happen next. So the realtor's now been updated and the client's been updated at least 3 times until we've had the approval. Now, if there is an appraisal required, there's another milestone email letting them know the appraisal is required. Here's what's going to happen, instructions on what those next steps are. Then another email is going to go out once the appraisal has been ordered to confirm it's been ordered, and letting them know, watch out for, you know, setting up appointments from a realtor perspective, or getting, you know, making payment for the appraisal from a client perspective. You know, I understand some people pay for appraisals and whatnot, but in our process, we didn't. And then once the appraisal is received, another milestone going back to the client outlining, hey, the appraisal has been received, and then actually outlining what the value is in that email as well. So there's a field that we use in our milestone section of our CRM that allows us to actually put the appraised value, and then that would be put into the email automatically as well. So those are the milestones that are coming. Those are templates that we'll have as takeaways in the resource center to provide you. And then all of those are accompanied by a text message. So as soon as the email is going out, a text message is happening as well with a very similar update. So that kind of leads us to now where we'll wrap this up, and which is an approval email. So this episode or series will end here from the approval. Obviously, we're going to have conditions. So maybe, Derek, you can kind of touch on the approval email and what's entailed in that approval email template. And then following that, assuming there's conditions, which typically there is always conditions, we would wrap those up in the next section of the PLP series, getting the deal to broker complete.
Yeah. So just the action when an approval comes in, first and foremost, the underwriter needs to look at the commitment in detail. So, and a big kind of takeaway for this, you're not just looking at broker conditions. You have to look at solicitor conditions. Oftentimes lenders will issue a commitment and they've noted that they're going to pay off a debt, but it's in the solicitor conditions. And if you miss that, it's going to come up last minute. So a detailed review of the approval. At the same time, you're documenting all this in an email template that we have. Hi, congratulations. We have received a conditional approval with XX lender. In summary, here are the details. So it'll outline again, property address, purchase price, down payment, approved mortgage, rate and term. Now, keep in mind, we do have some lenders that have discretionary rates. So you typically want to get this to the client right away, even if you're waiting on the revised rate. So you'll just reference that this is a rate that's been approved, files with head office or pricing. We expect to have the revised rate within a couple of days. Amortization, you're going to list the monthly payment. Again, if you're waiting on a lower rate, make mention that the rate will be dropping once we get your final interest rate confirmed. Closing date, and then there's a note. And keep in mind, so this email typically comes from the mortgage advisor, right? Like, this is a key point for the mortgage advisor to be involved in. It's a happy moment. It's a good piece. So the next note just references that this is a huge milestone in the process, but we're not done yet. Our next step is to submit and satisfy all remaining conditions as soon as possible. You'll list the associate mortgage advisor's name. You know, Dean Lawton is here to assist in collecting the final conditions, and we'll be sending updates throughout the subject period until we're broker complete. Then there's a bold list. Here's your outstanding conditions, right? So just as an example, solicitor information, signed commitment, appraisal, income, PAD form or void check, down payment, miscellaneous, and then there's a note for closing costs. I think everyone should have this in their email. Please verify closing costs in advance of completion with your lawyer or notary. Now, all those bullets that I just mentioned, there's context on each one, right? It's never going to be a clean templated email. For the income section, you might say, hey, you know what, we received your most recent pay stub, but it doesn't have 40 hours. We do need a 40-hour pay stub before closing. Down payment, we have 90 days of bank statements, but there's a couple large deposits, so we need verification of where that came from. Signed commitment. We'll be sending your mortgage commitment and compliance package via DocuSign, along with a Loom video with an explainer, and we're open to scheduling a phone call, right? Solicitor information. If you don't have a lawyer or notary, we have a couple that we can recommend. You always want to give your recommendations so that they're not working with a lawyer or notary that's going to drop the ball. And then just reference that the documentation is still under review with the lender, and further updates or requests may come. You will definitely want to preface that, because you get an initial list of conditions. As we all know, more conditions can come up as you continue to submit documents. So you want to set the tone with the client that, even if you send me your next bank statement, they might have more questions about that one, right? And I think the biggest thing that you really need to drive into the client's head at this point is, I know you're working, I know you have a family, I know you're busy. You guys need to be available. You need to make this priority in your life, especially if it's a purchase, because we have 3 days left to get this all done, right? And really highlighting what's important and what's key to get them to a subject removal that's, comfortable and confident.
Well said. I mean, that definitely covers everything in that template. And again, that's a template we'll share in the resource section of this episode. So look out for that. That pretty much wraps us up at this stage. So the deal's approved, and now we're going to move forward and get the deal broker complete. So the next episode and the last episode of this PLP series is broker complete to funded. And so it's all these steps of getting the deal complete and then getting the deal instructed and then ultimately funded. We end the PLP there at funded. Of course, there's a monster of items that need to occur after the deal funds to, properly retain the client and have, a perfect journey afterwards, which we'll touch on and look at a later series on just database and all the things that happen after funding. But that really does wrap up the perfect loan process and ultimately getting the deal to fund it. And so that's what you can look out for next episode. And that's where, again, we'll wrap the series. So just a couple additional resources that I'll touch on. Again, episode 9, the PLP overview, episode 13, the lead consultation process, episode 14, document process and review. Pre-review. And then episode 16 was the review stage and review summary. Last episode, episode 17, planning and strategy session. And then today, live deal to approve. So we'll finish this off with just some listener interaction. So we have a question, which I guess, Derek, I'll point to you for this. So do you resell your solution or strategy to the client when the deal goes live before you submit the deal? So is there a conversation or like another meeting with the client before submitting to just resell what you provided?
Yeah, always. I mean, even if you pre-approved that client 2 weeks ago, as we all know, things can change. They might have had a change of heart, maybe husband and wife or whoever, they've had different conversations. And so you want to have a phone call, go through the accepted offer email with them. Again, make sure everything's correct. Make sure down payment hasn't changed. Make sure they understand when their deposit's needed. Make sure they understand closing costs and the documents required. At the same time, you want to catch up and say, hey, you know what? We talked about a 2-year fix a month ago when we did your pre-approval. Rates have changed a little bit. They're a little bit lower, which is a positive. Here's what's going on the market. We've seen some Bank of Canada activity. You definitely want to have another conversation, catch them up to speed. And you always want to again, for efficiency, you never want to change things. But at that point, it's so immediate. They kind of have to make a decision on that call so you can submit the file. If their completion isn't for 3 months, let them know, hey, you know what? Go with your gut. As of right now, we need to get the application submitted and approved. If Bank of Canada comes down 2 more times before your completion date and variables looking more appealing, we can change this later, right? Assuming you qualify at that rate, we can make an adjustment. But for the sake of today and what you understand based on our education to this point, you got to let me know what you want to do. You got to catch up to speed on that, because if not, clients just don't know, right? You got to let them know what's going on at that point. And again, like throughout the process of this before closing, if there are changes, you need to be updating your clients on this, right? If rates come down on a 3-year, you need to be fighting to get them a lower rate with the lender that they're with. If variable starts to look more appealing, you want to make sure they have the education to make that decision before completion.
Well said. Don't really have any more to add to that. That does wrap up the episode. Jason, any comments or anything to point out?
No, I mean, it's been pretty cool just to watch this whole process go as we, kind of got right from our start phase as we're starting to wrap up. I've seen kind of a handful of our brokers at A Better Way adopt this perfect loan process system into their business, and to actually watch it function in real time has been pretty cool to see. So I'm excited to wrap this one up on the next episode, and all good things are happening.
Yeah, no, it definitely has been. I think that's a big piece, is just to see people actually implement this and see it kind of, see the magic work in their side of things. And again, like we keep hammering this point home, like you don't have to hire a team to do this. Like it's just really, it just comes down to creating a very consistent process that happens the same way every single time. And as a one-man show, even more important to have that structure in place and actually treat this like a business, opposed to, just flying by the seat of your pants. So we'll wrap it up there. Thanks for listening, and on to the next one. Thank you for tuning in. If you found value in this show, please subscribe to our channel on your preferred platform. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Your support is incredibly appreciated. We also welcome your reviews and feedback, which are crucial in helping us deliver outstanding educational content. Feel free to share your thoughts. A 5-star review would be fantastic if you think we earned it. Lastly, a vital announcement about Backpack Buddies, our chosen charity for 2024. This remarkable organization addresses a hidden hunger issue many are unaware of. In British Columbia, while school districts provide meals during school hours, numerous children face food scarcity at home, particularly during weekends. Backpack Buddy steps in to support these vulnerable children, ensuring they have easy to prepare, familiar food for weekends. This is achieved through collaborations with schools and an extensive distribution network. Your contribution can make a significant difference. With just $20, you can give a child in need a food bag from Backpack Buddies filled with enough meals and snacks to sustain them over the weekend and more. Once again, thank you for listening, and see you on the next one.